First of all, thanks to all of you who've joined in. I think it's amazing to have such a good attendance for a weekday session, and all credit really for this to both Dhruva and Pavitra. I think many in the group here know, what their credentials already are and what value they bring to the table. The topic we are going to talk about today is something that's really a hot button issue, probably worldwide, not just in India. And it is basically, something that was taken for granted not too long back, where, anytime anyone wanted to kind of go ahead of the curve, you would just aim for a US or a UK undergrad degree if you had the resources for it. But I think lately, with the geopolitics that have been going on, that has come up to some question at this point of time. So, about a couple of months back, when this topic first came to my mind, the first person I thought about approaching was Dhruva, who I knew was, one of the guys who's doing some really cutting edge stuff with this Lumiere education thing. And I've known Dhruva for about 3 or 4 years now. When he first came to one of the meetings at the Harvard Club of Chennai that we held, and I was super impressed. And from then on, he's just been on a pretty much on a rocket ship as far as different things he's achieved. And by the same token, Pavitra is a part of the Ivy Club of Chennai, and we've gotten to know each other very well over the last year or so. And I can't think of two better people at this point of time who can guide us through what is going on here. And going ahead, I think I'm going to let Dhruva and Pavitra take over and talk about what really is the path forward for many of us, especially those of us who have kids who are looking to whether this is a good time, safe time to send someone to a US or a UK college, or is it something that with everything going on in India right now, with many of these universities coming here, does it kind of make sense to, look the other way? So with that, Dhruva and Pavitra, the ball's in your court.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Really appreciate it. And, right at the outset, I would like to thank the Harvard Club of Chennai. The folks have been fantastic, so great at not only organizing events, but having the passion to make these kinds of collaborations happen, right, for everybody. And the amount of value add that they've brought in and their willingness to open it up to Ivy Club Chennai is given a lot of synergy, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So definitely a big shout out to the Harvard Club of Chennai, particularly the office bearers, Senthil, Sanjay, and Sanjeev. Guys doing a great job. Very inspiring. And I would also like to thank Radhika of Columbia and Charanya and a few others, because they did really get the word out and, this is our first online event of Ivy Club Chennai. So, it's a highlight moment for us. So thank you so much. And, I would want to answer Dhruva to answer this question. And here's the answer. Dhruva, would you say why it's still the best investment? You want to talk about it?
I think that's something that we're going to be answering over the course of the next 45 minutes. Our answer is yes. And I think that stems from our personal background. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dhruva. I grew up in Chennai. I grew up in Kottapuram, went to the PS Senior Secondary School, where I studied commerce. And that really was because I took physics and biology in the 9th and 10th and decided that that was terrifying and too hard for me to do. And I grew up in a context where studying abroad for undergrad was not really something that was talked about. I didn't know a single person who'd studied abroad for undergrad. I knew lots of people who'd gone down the traditional route of doing an engineering or medical degree in India and then going abroad for graduate school with the goal of eventually emigrating abroad. But what changed for me was I got involved in high school debate. So I was part of the Indian team that represented the country at the World Schools Debating Championships in 2011 in Scotland, 2012 in Cape Town, in 2013 in Turkey. And doing debate really changed the trajectory of my life. On the one hand, it pushed me to intellectually engage with topics that no one was allowing 13 and 14-year-olds to do in school. Questions like whether democracy is a better form of government than a dictatorship, what causes economic growth and how countries can encourage it, what the roots of ethnic conflict are and how to prevent it. And I started thinking about how I could explore those topics in greater detail, what kinds of undergraduate degrees would allow that. And I came across the American liberal arts system, and I fell in love with the idea. But it still seemed like such a faraway goal. We didn't have the financial ability to pay for something like that. And I didn't even know what the process of applying could look like. When I went to Scotland for the World Schools Debating Championships, I met the team that represented the UAE. And for those of you who know the UAE, Team UAE, unsurprisingly, was a team of Indian immigrants to Dubai. And it was kids who went to an international school in Dubai, and the competition was happening in August. And right after the competition, the members of that team were flying to Yale, Penn, Stanford, and NYU to start their undergraduate degrees. And that's when I realized it was even possible for students from outside the US to apply to these top universities and get in. And so I continued doing debate through high school. I also learned German at the Goethe Institute in Nungambakum, represented India at the International German Olympiad as well, became head boy in my final year, and all that together made what I thought was a compelling application. So I applied to universities in the US. The first place that I heard back from was from Carleton College, and it was a rejection. And I thought, okay, great, this is not going anywhere. Why did I even try? Let me just focus on my board exams and on CLAT to study law in India. But a few weeks later, it was what's called Ivy Day, which is the day that all the Ivy League universities released their admissions results. And it was the day before my economics board exam. And I had initially told myself, I'm not going to check my results until after the board exam finishes, because if it goes well and I get in somewhere, then I'll be too happy to continue studying for this exam. If it goes poorly, then I'll be really sad and not be in a place to do well in the exam. But unfortunately, what I hadn't counted on was that the email app, the Gmail app on my phone sends notifications. And I got a notification from Harvard 7 a.m. that day that started with the words, congratulations. And that was when I allowed myself to log into the portal, check the admissions result, and I found that I'd gotten into Harvard. But even though I'd gotten in and I was very excited about it, I didn't allow myself to get my hopes up, because I knew that I couldn't go unless I got financial aid. And the nice thing about Harvard is that they do need-based financial aid, where they look at your family's financial status. We had to submit our income tax documents, bank statements, all of that. And then a few weeks later, I got the financial aid package, which said that I'd gotten full need-based financial aid to go to Harvard. And that's when I said, okay, this is actually happening. Going for the start of freshman year in August was the first time I'd ever visited the US. And I had an incredible 4 years studying economics and German and English literature and philosophy and religion and everything in between. And it also kind of opened my mind to the world of research. So the summer after my second year of undergrad, I did a research program over at the Harvard Business School. And I found that there were people that were spending all their time investigating exactly those questions that I was curious about as a kid in high school doing debate, questions about economic development, about ethnic conflict, about politics and economics. And so that set me on a trajectory of research. After college, I thought I was going to become a professional nerd. So I went straight into graduate school. I got the scholarship called the Rhodes Scholarship to go to Oxford to study and do my master's and then my PhD in international development. But life had a different idea for what I was eventually going to end up doing. 5.5 years ago, during the pandemic, I was meant to be doing research for my thesis, but the world was on pause, and I was back in my childhood bedroom in Kottuppuram trying to figure out what was going to happen with my life. And that's when a classmate of mine from undergrad reached out. He and I had actually done that research program together in college. And he said, hey, I'm on a career break. I'm about to start a PhD back at the Harvard Business School in September, and I want to do something entrepreneurial. Do you want to do it with me? And so I thought, why not? And we started Lumiere that summer as an online research program. We had 12 students, mainly from India and Vietnam, join. And we matched them with mentors who were PhD candidates or postdocs at top universities in the US and the UK. And the mentors guided them as they explored the topic and wrote a paper in the field. That 12 students became 40 in the fall and 60 in the winter. And now, 5.5 years later, we run an education group that continues to run the research program, but also runs other programs. So we run internship programs where we place students at top startups called ladder internships. We run a machine learning and AI program called Veritas AI, an entrepreneurship program called the Young Founders Lab. And this year we acquired Immerse Education, which is a company that does in-person summer camps at college campuses in the UK, the US, and Asia. So it's gone far beyond what Steve and I would have imagined 5.5 years ago. And we've worked with thousands of students from all across the world, including India, over the last 6 years. And I'm super excited over the course of this conversation to talk to you guys about both my experience as well as the experience of the students that we've seen go through middle school and high school, and then eventually apply abroad. Pavitra, with that extensive introduction, I'll pass to you.
Thank you so much, Dhruva. Very interesting to see our trajectories. I also spent a good part of my childhood in Chennai, and I was very keen to study abroad for my undergrad. Okay, but my parents would have none of it, right? They said no way we are sending a girl abroad. After high school. So I had the exposure, but I did not have the the decision making, right? So they said you can take your SATs. I took my SATs, so I was very clear, like, this is what I wanted to do, but I could not do it. Okay. And so I joined an engineering college in around Chennai, and I was very clear that I have to go for my master's, right? Because I couldn't get to go for my undergrad. Now, ironically, it so happens that I've helped hundreds of students actually go abroad for their, undergrad and master's, PhD, and so on. But that was how my journey started. And I was very fortunate to, do well on my test prep projects, internships, and all of that. And I won a full fellowship to Stanford to study digital signal processing. It's a part of it comes under electrical engineering. And in a lot of colleges in India, so DSP is actually known. It has a pet abbreviation. It's called the Degree Stopping Program, because it's actually it's considered one of the hardest papers in engineering. So when I decided to do my master's in it, it was a very, I got a lot of interesting reactions from my friends, and I'm very happy that I got into Stanford to do, image processing and digital signal processing. And I also worked in the Bay Area for a while in this field. So you could say that at heart, I am a techie, designer / techie, right? And Stanford was an eye-opening experience for me, right? I realized how much I struggled in the first quarter. They don't have a semester system; they have a quarter system. And I was a University of Madras gold medalist. I was my college topper in undergrad, right? But the shock that I got after getting into Stanford, and I will talk about it. I will talk about why I felt that while I was studying in an extremely good undergraduate institute, by India or Chennai or Tamil Nadu standards, it still didn't hold a candle to the kind of competition and the experience that I encountered at Stanford, right? And we'll talk about it. So one of the things that I did while at Stanford was I had to support my family. So I started taking tuitions, right? Because then I could earn in dollars and send the money back to India, right? I wanted to put my brother through college and all of that. And in the process of taking tuitions for American kids, I'm like, wow, this is, I'm earning well, and I'm just doing things that come easily to me. And because I'm a techie at heart, at some point I had the dream of scaling personalized education, right? When I worked with students who were about to give up their, courses and then take them from a D, and then next semester a B, and then an A, and then their life changed. That gave me a lot of, you could say, confidence, and also made me feel that I made impact, right? I'm able to add value to, but at the same time, I'm someone who loves doing things at scale, right? I don't want to do one student at a time. So working in the Bay Area in tech companies kind of, keeps that, gives you that, right, mindset. And Stanford is also a very entrepreneurial place, right? Just like Harvard has its own atmosphere. Right? You can just count, I mean, the number of politicians and successful lawyers who in the US who have a Harvard background. It's similar to the number of Silicon Valley startup founders who have a Stanford, or for that matter a Berkeley background, right? Like they're both top universities and they have their own interesting ambience which sort of leads people to a certain direction. So I thought that was pretty interesting, right? So having done a few things abroad and in India, I decided to start my company. And I actually started it as a tech company to build a platform for anyone to start their online academy, right? And it so happens that we decided, hey, why not start our own online academy just to make it a proof of concept, right? To show how you would go about launching courses on, an online platform. And when we launched the GRE prep courses, we started getting student enrollments. I remember my first few students I got students from Agartala in Tripura. I got people from various parts, because when you don't have access to a coaching center there and you have something online, then this is great. This is pre-COVID, right? What I'm talking about. And very soon we got students from more than 400 cities and towns in India, and then we started getting students from abroad. By then, the GRE students wanted us to offer TOEFL and IELTS prep, and then they said, "Hey, why don't you help us apply to universities and go through the entire journey?" Right? So we said, "Okay, fine." So we kind of made the a pivot from a B2B learning management system to a B2C product and service organization, right, which was Galvanize Global Education. And in the course of this journey, I also built and launched a couple of mobile apps for GRE prep, for vocabulary building, and they got more than 1 million downloads from 195 countries. And that was it was such a interesting way to know that you can create impact at scale, right? You combine the right pedagogy with the right technology, and then you can do so many things. So yeah, that's pretty much my background. So I'm a product person at heart as well. So these are some of the things I've done. You can see I've had my finger in many pies. Well, I think we have bored our audience enough. But the point being, we have our experiences is have led to us being able to share with you today, and you can also glean from our journey that whatever journey and decisions that you're going to take today are going to have their own path, right? And ultimately, like Steve Jobs says, the dots do connect backwards. So fantastic. So just wanted to, Dhruva, would you like to talk about what we're going to cover and take it from here?
Yeah, so we're going to first begin with the question of, should we even be thinking about an undergraduate degree in this age of AI and disruption? If you go on Twitter, you see so many people talking about how the undergraduate degree is dead. We'll then go from that into the question of, where do you do that undergrad? You think about studying in India versus abroad. Also, this question of, if you do want to study abroad at some point, is it better to think about that for undergrad, or go the traditional Indian route of doing undergrad in India and then going abroad for grad school? And then what the actual process of applying for undergrad abroad is for some common destinations like the US, UK, and Singapore, and then what it takes, anchored in student examples, to actually get into some of the top universities in the world. And so let's begin with our first question of whether an undergraduate degree is worth it. You open the news and you see news about so much disruption. There's AI, there's automation, the gig economy is booming, and these are redefining how we think about education's return. And you also see the growth of alternative education models like coding bootcamp and online courses. And you see companies responding to this a little bit as well by relaxing the requirements they have for undergraduate degrees, especially in tech and coding and data science, and offering competitive salaries without requiring a 4-year degree. You also see more and more people starting companies right when they're in college and dropping out, or right after college and doing things that are unrelated to their undergrad degree. Could move to the next slide. But at its core, and we'll talk about this more in the upcoming slides, an undergraduate degree continues to be worth it. And I think will be worth it in the long term, especially if you do it from a university that has the kind of resources and environment that can really set you up well for the future. All evidence that we have suggests that college graduates earn significantly more than those who don't have undergraduate degrees across the world, including in India and the US. And being in college really changes who you are. Being in college made me understand what it means to be an adult. It helped me live by myself for the first time. You gain access to mentors and a community, and you also network with other people in college. It's not a surprise that I started Lumiere with a friend of mine from undergrad, because these are the people that you hang out with, that you've seen grow up alongside you, that you've gone to parties with, that you've been next to when they're crying about their breakups. And so I am so grateful for my undergraduate degree. And if I could do it again, I would 100% make the same decision that I did. And so over to you, Pavitra.
Okay, thank you, Dhruv. And so the question is, where do you do your undergrad degree, right? And this is a very personal question for me. Like I said, I so wanted to do it abroad and I couldn't get to, right? And then, and now I'm like, I actually have the experience of being able to compare and contrast, having done my master's abroad, like what it actually was to do the undergrad here. So a lot of parents watching this session, and I think if you have, as parents, you have done your undergrad degree in India, let me tell you that not much has changed, right? What do I mean by that? First, let's say you want your child to get into the best universities in India for undergrad, right? I'm taking the example of IITs because they're very well known, but for whatever field, aims for medicine or something like that, let's say you want to aim for the best experience in India, and that definitely our best experiences are really good. Guess what? Because of our population of 1.4 billion people, the number of JEE registrations is more than 13 lakh in last year. That's how many people want to get in. And then those who qualified for the advanced. And then it is actually, by the way, the JEE advanced is supposed to be the world's second most challenging exam. I will tell you the first one later if you're curious about it. And of those who cleared the exam and actually made it in, it's less than 10,000 people who actually got into the IITs, and that's like the old IITs and the new IITs, and the so-called more reputed ones and the new ones, right? So that being the case, what are the odds that your kid will make it into the top tier institutes in India is something that as parents, you really have to think through. Because the experience at these top institutes is truly great. There's no doubt about it. Right. But then you have to be the cream of the cream. And then you have to, and even then there's a lot of, a role that luck plays in. Right. So now suppose you don't really get into these, or let's say you do get into these, right? Now, the funny part is, if you look at the world ranking of universities, right, and these are the rankings of the top IITs, the, and ISCs, in across the world, and these are the QS world rankings. I can actually point to you a whole bunch of universities, and I've not picked Harvard or Stanford or MIT or Princeton on the screen here, because that they are anyway, better than the IITs I've shown here. I've picked a whole bunch of schools which are ranked much higher than our IITs. And these are fantastic institutes. And guess what? It's much easier to get into these schools than the IITs, right? So you have the combination of an easier journey to actually get accepted to these schools. Plus, you have the better undergrad experience as well, right? When you get into these. And these are just some examples, right? There are IIT Bombay is ranked 118. So you can think, there are like more than 100 institutes that are ranked better and that are actually easier to get into on the average, right? Because sheerly going by the acceptance rate. right? So this is something a lot of parents are very surprised, but they have not thought about it this way. So I wanted to bring this context in, and that's the whole context. Now the point is like, how about undergrad? What if I do undergrad in a non-top tier institute in India and then go abroad for my master's? Sure, you can. But let me also explain to you what you will be spending your time unlearning. Okay, it is very hard to unlearn. It's much easier to learn than it is to unlearn. Now, in those 4 years in India, or 3 years, depending on your undergrad degree, if you don't get into the top tier institutes, trust me, the learning is still based on rote learning. Okay, a lot of students who do well in, who have good outcomes from their undergrad experience in India are those who actually, it was not the class or the coursework or the lab work that they benefited from, but it's the internship opportunities that they took on, or it's the culturals and the other activities that they did. But if you actually come to the teaching part, the whole education system here is still very much rote learning based, right? And that is not the way that a higher education institute should be. And I'm talking about the non-top tier ones, right? What do we mean by rote learning? So I'll give you a very personal, something that I experienced when I went to Stanford. I was so surprised to know that the exams would all be open book exams. Right? That I can take my textbooks to the classroom on the exam day. I can write down whatever. In fact, the faculty would say, hey, you can bring an A4 size cheat sheet. They call it a cheat sheet. Means you can write whatever you want, however tiny you want, index it and bring it to the exam. And I thought, wow, okay, with this kind of freedom, I will be acing the exams. I did not. Okay, it was so hard. And not because the questions were from outside the syllabus or the curriculum, but unless you understood the concepts, you could not apply them in different contexts, right? There's nothing, they don't want you to just by heart things from the textbook and spit it out on the paper. In fact, today, if you go to any college topper in a typical undergrad program in India today, okay, and and try this out with your neighbors, with your relatives, and with your friends, and talk to the topper who topped last semester, and then one semester later show him or her the exam papers that they topped in last semester and ask them to take a shot at it, right? They would struggle because, and it's not their fault. That's because the system rewards you sufficiently enough for just cramming everything the night before. But you cannot think of cramming, you can't think of starting to study for a GRE or an SAT the night before the exam, right? But we do that every semester for our college exams in India, and that system has not changed. So as a parent in India, you're essentially paying not for the quality of education that the institute is giving, but you're essentially paying for the degree certificate, and you hope that your child will make use of various internship opportunities, cultural opportunities, organizations, and all of those things, because the actual learning that they're going to get is very limited, right? So that's the honest truth, right? So, okay, so when you talk about the learning, then what about the faculty? Now, needless to say, abroad, the faculty are, they're passionate and they're experts in their field, right? They are teaching because they love what they're doing and they do the research in it. They're pioneers in their field, right? In India, unfortunately, again, barring the top institutes, often it's true that faculty, it's not something that someone aspires to become, right? They don't find any other job, and sometimes people end up here, right? You will find that they hardly know more than you about the subject that they're teaching, right? So abroad, it's very different. It's extremely prestigious to be a faculty member at a university. And I'm not just talking about the top 10 or 20 or 30. You can go all the way to, like, say, the top 200 or 300 or 400 institutes in the US, and it's still extremely prestigious. Because the people who get into that position, they do that because they care about what they do. They have actually pushed the boundaries of knowledge in their field. I remember this one incident in the campus of Berkeley campus. So when we had all gone to Stanford and Berkeley, there's always this, rivalry, like MIT and Harvard, right? So Berkeley had parking spots. So your parking spots are labeled, right? Depending on if you have that permit, you can park there. So very close to the entrance of the building, the parking spots were NL. So if you had an NL tag or if you had an NL authorization, then you can park there. And I was like, what is this NL? And then I found that it stands for Nobel laureates. So faculty who are Nobel laureates get to park in the closest spots. Okay, and that's the kind of people that you will learn from. These are people who have, made seminal discoveries in their field. And when you get there's no better source of learning. It's like, getting the knowledge right from the horse's mouth, right? So, and why are all these faculty here? Why have they done this kind of pioneering research? Truth be told, institutes in the US and UK, and the governments also have invested tremendous amounts in their research experience. For example, the US alone, typically the equivalent of 60,000 crore Indian rupees, the US government invests every year. They give that money for their higher education institutes to conduct research. A lot of that goes into the labs, into the infrastructure. There's a reason why so many of these discoveries and the state-of-the-art stuff happens there. Right? You have I don't need to name names, but you can take an Elon Musk who's from South Africa or a Sundar Pichai who is from India, and ultimately all of them go to the US and, and then they start their companies or they build stuff there, right? I think the culture and the investment, everything has sort of come together neatly. There are many other, other examples, right? This is a very interesting point. So, industry and academia collaborate like anything. Right? The whole of Silicon Valley wouldn't have been possible if not for this kind of collaboration. Right? Cisco was started at Stanford. Google was started by two PhD students at Stanford. I don't know if many people know this, but Hewlett and Packard were two research assistants in the electrical engineering department of Stanford. And as soon as you enter my department, you will see the first some transistor or some equipment that they had built, and that's put in a glass case. Right. And because of their relationship with the university, Hewlett and Packard were able to get their headquarters on Stanford leased land. In other words, the HP headquarters sits on a 99-year lease on land owned by Stanford. It's a beautiful campus right next to the university. Right. There's just too many examples that I can give you, but you don't have this kind of collaboration in India yet. Right? You open the paper, you see colleges talking about a new memorandum of understanding, an MOU they have signed with this company, with that company. But how much of research and how much of or entrepreneurship, for that matter, is actually happening in universities and with connection with the industries, right? And how much of it is just naam ke vaste, right? And another very interesting part about studying abroad, if you were to do your undergrad there, is the collaboration across diverse fields. Right? So in India, if I were to ask you what is the best engineering institute, you'd probably say the IITs, right? And for management, then you have, IIMs or ISB and so on. And then for medicine, you have AIMS. And everything is sort of separated out, right? It's in silos. Contrast that with, again, I'll go back to Stanford as an example. Right? Stanford is among the top 3 for engineering, top for law, top for medicine, top for MBA, top for humanities, top for business. So, and it's not true just for Stanford. A lot of universities in the US have taken this approach, right? You would go, Harvard Law, Harvard Medicine, Harvard Business School. Okay, they're the best. So these are completely independent fields. Now, by housing such independent diverse disciplines under one campus. Imagine it's like in India, imagine you have in one campus, you have IIT Bombay, you have IIM Ahmedabad, and you have AIMS Delhi, and you have all of them in one campus, right? A national law school and all of that. What kind of a synergy would emanate from such an institute, right? It has a whole is greater than the sum of its parts effect. Right? So these are all certain things, and if you have this kind of experience during the 4 formative years of your undergrad, then naturally you're going to get, superior career opportunities are going to follow, right? You can do so many, many things. So in undergrad here, honestly, if I have to summarize this part, the responsibility of a higher education institute, right? It is many things, but in short, it is to prepare the students who graduate from there to succeed in the real world, to give them the knowledge and the experience and the attitude, right? To be able to take whatever they have learned and contribute. Now, in India, honestly, a lot of that falls on the students' shoulders, right? And that is something very, very unique about an undergraduate experience abroad. So over to you, Dhruva. Do you want to talk about having, I've talked about all the positives, so my life has been easy. So now you're going to talk about the concerns.
Amazing. And these are concerns that I think are very reasonable and on top of people's minds. The first one is the cost. I think that's unavoidable. The cost of degrees, especially in the US, are higher than in India and rising. It's often a 4-year degree as opposed to sometimes a 3-year degree here as well. The one sidebar here is that while costs are higher in across the board in the West, it's not necessarily true in, say, the UK or Singapore, and Pavitra will talk more about that in a second. So it's worth expanding the scope of places that you look at. But the question here is not just what is the cost, but what is the cost to benefit ratio? And I think that is what you need to evaluate. And the nature of a top university in the US is that the starting salaries right out of undergrad are incredibly high. I was speaking to someone who's doing an undergrad at NYU. He's looking at roles at hedge funds. Starting salaries there are 250K or more USD to kick off. The average starting salary for a Harvard College grad is about 100K, and that's taking into account everyone who goes into grad school, everyone who goes into a nonprofit, and so on. And the lifelong earning potential then becomes a lot higher as well. And this is assuming, of course, that you pay sticker price for tuition. And there's, for the top ranking universities, need-based financial aid based on families' financial circumstances. And for the non-top universities, a large number of scholarships that you could look to as well, especially if you have expertise as a high school student in a particular area. So there are sports scholarships, for instance, for students that are excelling in sports. There are arts and debate scholarships. There's other types of scholarships as well. Linked to that, though, is you only realize that earning potential if you stay in that country and earn in dollars or pounds or whatever that is. And we're seeing the news of rising immigration restrictions in the West, rise of right-wing governments across the world, which are saying, we don't want these people coming into our country. And I think that's a very fair concern. But two things to think about there are, first of all, that most countries have preferential visas policies for people that have studied in their country. So even this policy that Trump was discussing of charging $100,000 for H-1Bs that are being issued had a exception for people who had gone to undergrad in the US. So if you'd gone to undergrad in the US, if a company wanted to sponsor your H-1B, you no longer needed to pay the 100K as opposed to if you'd gone to undergrad somewhere else. And the kinds of universities that these are and the networks that they open up mean that it's also much more transferable across regions. So let's say you go to a top university in the US, people in Japan, people in Singapore, people in Germany have heard of that university, and they are likely, if you on your resume say that you went to an undergrad there, give it a second look. You have classmates who came from these countries, and so you have networks in those countries as well. You have professors from those countries who worked in those countries. And so if you do need to move, you have the ability to say, okay, hey, friend from freshman year, I am in the position of having to move to the Netherlands. Do you have a sense of people that I can talk to or organizations that I can look at? And that person's, because you were in college with them and is from that country, is likely to say, okay, absolutely, let me set you up. Linked to that is, okay, when you're there, are you going to be safe as a 17-year-old? Are you going to be able to manage all on your own? And I think this is a legitimate concern, but one that sometimes Indian parents don't give their kids enough credit for. Your kids, if you've raised them well, are incredible humans. They've built a good sense of themselves and who they are in the world. And allowing them to fly the nest actually gives them the opportunity to realize that for themselves and continue building those skills. There's no question that it's going to be hard. There's going to be cultural differences. There's going to be understanding how to do laundry for the first time. But being able to do all of those things, I think, gives you such a sense of independence and courage that you feel like you could take anything on in the future. And the university is always there to support you. So one really cool thing about universities abroad is that they might not handhold you, but if you ever need support, they are there to help you. So in my freshman year at Harvard, I realized that I was having to read more than I ever had to in my life. So there was an on-campus course that I could take for either free or very cheap. That was a speed reading course where they taught you to speed read. There are peer tutors that you can reach out to for help. You have a residential advisor that when you are struggling and missing home, you can speak to, that organizes weekly events for you in your dorm room. And I think all of those mean that you have the support system if you need it. The university is there to protect and support you, but they're doing that in the context of you becoming an adult and becoming an independent person in a way that sets you up for life. And there I really have to underscore, your kids are capable of a lot more than you might think, and so don't underestimate them. And then finally, I think there's a real question around the future of where the world is going, especially if you look at the UK or Europe. Their economies are stagnant and not growing nearly at the rate that India is. And I think the question there becomes, while that is true, what does that have to do with where you go to undergrad? So the first point here is that studying in the US is that the United States continues to be the world's leading economy. If you look at any industry, the top companies in those industries, the head offices are all based in the US. It continues to be at the cutting edge of technology, with maybe some exceptions where China is taking over. But India is unfortunately both at a per capita economic level, as well as in terms of the leading companies that are doing cutting edge work, far behind where both the US and China are. And being exposed to these types of companies and these types of environments early in your career sets a new sense of ambition. So when I was in college, my senior thesis advisor was the same person who advised the senior thesis of Ben Bernanke, who is the Fed chair, the chair of the Federal Reserve, which is, as you guys probably know, the US's equivalent of the Reserve Bank of India, who shepherded the US economy through the 2008 financial crisis. And so that's the kind of ambition that I was setting for myself. My classmates went on to start companies that are worth billions of dollars and are doing cutting edge work in their fields. And so even if the end goal and your belief is that your kids might come back to India, being exposed to that kind of environment, those kinds of cultural differences across different groups, and being able to set those kinds of ambitions where you feel like you can make a difference on the world stage, I think is worth a lot and will set them up for success even if they eventually come back to the country.
So that's a very wholesome and holistic assessment, right? There's, you have to trust your children, right? And if you brought them up well, they should be able to be independent, and they can get that exposure, and they can always come back to India if they want to, or they can go and live in any part of the world, and you can spend time with them there. So it's not a one-way street, right? I'll be covering this later, but like you said, you do get to stay back and earn there. And a lot of your tuition can get taken care of as long as you're not partying every day and buying a Merc and all of that, right? So it pretty much depends on how you manage your lifestyle. All right. So how is the process of applying to universities different from that of India? Now, this is a huge difference, and parents and students are quite shocked when they come to learn about this. And that is what makes the application process also very rewarding. I always tell my students that even if you are going to, even if you might study in India for your undergrad and your plan B is to study abroad, let's say for whatever reason you didn't get into the best institute here and so you're going there, or the vice versa. The person who applies and who writes their college essays and all of them, goes through the process, and the person who completes the process will be two different people. Right? You would have evolved so much more in your journey of application to undergrad abroad. That does not happen. The journey of applying, of getting into Indian universities. And Dhruva, please, do talk about that.
Awesome. So as we all are probably familiar, Indian universities have a single point evaluation. For some of them, that's how you do in your board exams. For some of them, it's an entrance exam like CLAT or IIT JEE or NEET. In comparison, the US and the international applications processes are a little bit different. Especially for the US, it's a holistic evaluation process, which is more similar some of the new age universities in India like Ashoka and Kriya and Plaksha, where a whole bunch of different things are taken into account. First, they look at students' transcripts from ninth grade all the way through till 12th grade. They also look at test scores and tests like the SATs or the ACT, as well as any additional scores that you have from exams like the AP exams. But all of that is taken into account in the context of who you are as a person and how you've spent your time in high school. They're looking for students that can stand out in that pool. And so they look at other activities that you've done, like internships, like research projects, like volunteering, and so on. And I think a lot of people are generally familiar with that idea, but think that that means that in order to get in, you have to be well-rounded. And I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. So we could go to the next slide.
Yeah. It's something, yeah.
So Jeff Selingo, who's one of the foremost experts on the college admissions process in the US, has this quote that I really like, which says that the problem with well-rounded students is that they usually don't focus on one thing for a prolonged period of time. To an external observer, it feels like they're just checking off a series of boxes. So rather than thinking about it as being well-rounded, how should you, as a parent of a high school student, think about what a student should be doing in high school? Could go next. I would think of middle school and the first kind of year and a half of high school, so 9th through the middle of 10th grade, as exploring the world, exploring what your interests are, and building that out. So you do a sport, you explore music, you volunteer a little bit, you travel, you do some research. But the goal of a high school student is that when they apply to university, they should feel like and come across as having deep experience and being at the high school level an expert in the field. So what you need to do is not just have a broad set of experiences, but also deepen your engagement. So let's say you have a kid who's interested in the environment. In middle school, they have learned in EVS classes about the environment and are curious about it. Maybe in the 9th grade, they start volunteering, and that's what they feel like is their real passion. And so what would be important there is to continue deepening that. So maybe they learn about in middle school, they start volunteering at an environmental nonprofit in the 9th or 10th grade. Over time, they continue sticking with that nonprofit. They don't just do it for 3 months or 6 months and drop off, but they do it over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, growing in that organization, go from volunteering to maybe leading volunteer efforts, recruiting other people, running campaigns or operations for that nonprofit. Based on what they're learning and identifying, maybe they write an article about the issue that they publish on their blog or in a local newspaper. And they build all of that into starting something of their own, a social enterprise that tries to make a difference in their local society. What's important here to recognize is that this does not need to be some kind of crazy international accomplishment. Of course, those help. If you go to the International Math Olympiad or if you represent your country in sports, that definitely helps. But universities recognize that not all students are going to be doing that. Instead, what they're looking for is, have you genuinely, as a high school student, thought about your interests and put in deep, consistent, hard work towards those interests to develop a niche for yourself? You go to the next slide. And so you could think about kind of different types of students. A basic student is someone who's well-rounded, who's done a little bit of different things, maybe done one thing, then switched to another, and so on. A small spike is a student who's done that and maybe done it at a club level at their school. A big spike is someone who's done the various different things that I've talked about, stuck with that over time, maybe done something at the national level. And then ideally, a student would be in the final category, which, if you go next, has a spike and then also has the ability to demonstrate that they're not a single-minded candidate. So in my case, my clear spike was debate. I represented the debate team at the national level. I did it for 3 years. I put in so much time and energy into it and really excelled. But I also had this other thing going on, which was learning German. And my school didn't require me to do either of these things. I did it because I loved it. I did it because I was excited about it. But by doing that, a admissions officer who's reading my application had an image of me that would stick out in their head when they've gone through 1,000 applications and they need to talk about it in committee. They would say, okay, there's that kid from Chennai, the debater kid, the one that also speaks German. I think he's got something really going for him. And that, I think, is what helps set students apart, is one clear thing that they've engaged in deeply, consistently over time, and something additional that makes them an interesting candidate, that makes them stand out a little bit more.
Yeah. So that actually is a big difference, right? The kind of what they're looking for, right? The universities abroad. And that means the person that you are in your 8th or 9th grade, now that's going to change over the next 4 years, because if you're aiming only for a top institute in India, and barring the new age universities that we spoke about, then you're going to just be spending all your time going to tuition and classes and coaching and cramming and making sure you ace the exams, right? Whereas if you do go aspire for undergrad, then everything changes completely. What you do during your grade 9, 10, 11, 12 completely changes, right? And therefore you come out a different person altogether. So that experience itself, I would say is worth it, right? So here's, so like Dhruva spoke, the way you build your profile has to originate from what your goal is, right? And this is something very interesting about the US system. Now, unlike other countries, in the US, you can actually do your undergrad, you can apply for your undergrad degree without declaring your major. In the sense, if you're not clear what you want to study, it's still okay, right? It's still acceptable to apply to the university, and then you can take a whole bunch of courses in your freshman year, or the first year as it's called, and then you can declare your major in your second year. Obviously, you'll have to meet the criteria of that department, right? You can't say I want to major in art and you don't, you've not proven to them that you're good at it. But the point is, they take you for who you are, right? Which means you have to build your profile in accordance with what your goals are. If you have clarity about your goal, great, then we will guide you to build your profile in one particular way. But if you don't have clarity, and that's perfectly fine, because a lot of the activities that you do, whether it's the test preparation, that is, independent of what you want to study, or the leadership activity, the community impact. So end of the day, it's be clear about your goal is okay. If you're not clear, that's also okay. We've had many students who have juggled JEE as well as applying to universities abroad at the same time. And that's perfectly possible. Okay. And the point is, what do you do? And I know this is a slightly heavy slide, and feel free to take a screenshot if you wish. So some of the parents reached out to me and say, hey, in addition to US and UK, what about Singapore? That's like a nice via media, right? It's abroad, but it's not like, a Western country. It's closer to India, but it's, and all of that. So we managed to include that in the last minute here. The point is, the timeline for studying abroad now, it's not just about your academics. Now, it's assumed that your academics has to be really good, especially the UK and Singapore give a lot of importance to your academics, right? And as opposed to the US, yes, the US academics is important, but they also care about your extracurriculars. So, for example, if you look at your profile building, all three countries want you to focus on, in addition to academics, can you do research projects in areas that you're interested in? Because they want you to prove to them that on your own initiative, you're ready to go deep into an area and, understand it and be able to explain it and do something with it, right? So these are that's what I mean by co-curricular. But the US is also focused on extracurricular activities, like what Dhruva spoke about, right? The community, the social impact, leadership, entrepreneurship. And they want to see signs of these in high school itself. So do try and see what you can do in different grades. And then the admissions tests, you can take them in different years. Some of our students take the SAT even in grade 9 or 10 because the exam score is valid for 5 years. But most students take them in grade 11. Now, the US requires the SAT and the ACT. Singapore, some universities do. The UK doesn't require these tests, right, in generally. But they do require alternative tests which are based on the course that you want to study for. Now, irrespective, all universities want to make sure your English proficiency is good enough that you can communicate there and you can understand what the faculty are speaking and so on. So the English tests are important. They are definitely required for the UK. Any one of these, the TOEFL or the IELTS, can be taken. TOEFL is more popular in the US. IELTS is more popular in Europe and and UK and so on. UK, sometimes they waive the test, the English proficiency test, based on which, suppose you attended an international, like the Cambridge curriculum, the IGCSE board for your schooling, or the IB, and then you did exceptionally well in English there, then they know that your English is good enough. So they don't really require that you take the test, but it varies from university to university, right? So this is kind of how you can structure the timeline. The admissions counseling and the strategy part is extremely crucial because, again, it is not getting accepted to one of these universities is not at all based on just the academics, right? We saw they wanted you to do all this. Now, how do they know what you have learned from doing all this? So they have college essays. So you have to write application essays. The typical US applicant might end up writing at least 40 different essays. Okay. And it sounds like a lot of work, but you're not going to do it all overnight. Remember, you're not cramming for an exam, right? So the titles of these essays sometimes change from year to year. And I'll just give you some examples. Stanford, for example, asked in their undergraduate, so Stanford asked this question of their undergraduate applicants: what is your favorite word and why? Okay. Indian universities don't care. They don't want to know. And the answer is, there's no perfect answer. It's not, you can't say, oh, my favorite word is pizza because I like pizza. Right? You have to pick something that is very close to your heart and talk about it and why you're so passionate about it. The University of Chicago used to ask this very interesting essay question in their application form for undergrads, which goes like this: if you could go to any historical figure and give them any modern technology, who would you choose and what technology would you give them and why? There is no right answer, but if you actually put your brains to this and your heart to this, what will come out is something that showcases your individuality. It tells the university what kind of change you want to make in the world. It tells them what historical events impacted you and how you would have liked to equip your idols with something that you have today and how you would like to see change in the world. So there's no right answer, but these questions give the admissions officers insight into who you are as a person. Right? What is the unique signature that you bring into their campus? Right? Remember, the university is literally interviewing you at this point. These are questions that they sound like behavioral interview questions because they are. It's just that they happen to be submitted on an essay format. And some universities also ask for a resume, which is a video resume, right? Where you can talk about something that you're very passionate about. And they want to see how you present yourself, right? So the journey of these essays and these interviews is what makes the undergraduate application to universities abroad completely different from the Indian counterpart. Because when you've written 40 to 50 essays, trust me, on topics like what examples I gave, and it varies from one school to the other, you come out a different person because you have thought a lot about yourself. You're forced to think what gives you meaning in life, right? And even when parents tell me, hey, when I read my child's essay, I never realized that incident 3 years back in this particular native village of ours has touched them so much. I'm touched, right? So parents, in fact, discover facets of their children that they never knew when they read the admissions essays of their kids. So even if you're not, even if you're applying abroad, is plan A great. If it's plan B, fine. But do go through the journey, apply to universities and see, because not only will you Will it reveal aspects about you to yourself, just going through the journey? But also you will know what admission you could have gotten, right? I have students who got accepted to Purdue and chose to do his undergrad in BITS and then go for masters, right? But if he had not gone through the application journey, he would have never known that he could have gotten to Purdue, right, for engineering. So the point is, go through the journey and then see what you get, and then you can always make your decision, because the timeline is such that by the time you finish applying to universities, it'll actually be before the JEE mains. The JEE mains is in December. So you'd be pretty much done applying by October, November. So don't worry, about whether this will clash with the Indian exam. Everything is done typically by the first half of your 12th standard. Right. So you can try and do both, focusing on the Indian exams as well as the abroad exams. But I mean, the process rather, not the exams. But it definitely changes your perspective into what you might experience, right? Often parents ask me, hey, what's the cost? What is the stayback period? So I put these two together, and you can also see how many universities are there in the world's top 200 list from these countries. India has 4 as of date. The US has 46, the UK has 38, 28, lots of universities. And the stayback period is without even requiring an H-1B visa. Okay. If you've done your STEM degree in the US, you can stay back and earn there for 3 years. Let's say your starting salary is $100,000. All right. And that's honestly, I'm not even going into the hedge fund like numbers, right? I'm going to a very, 100K is acceptable, right? And you will be able to pay back a bulk of your tuition. Like I said, you live frugally and you get that experience. And then wherever you go in the world, that experience is recognized. So these are the trade-offs that you will have to consider. So over to you, Dhruva, and let's actually see some real faces and what these different students did for their journey. And then we will throw it open to Q&A.
Fabulous. So first thing that I want to talk about is, if we could go to the next slide. This kid named Shivan, who came from Pune, and he had a super interesting background. He'd done the Brown Summer School and had some experience of the topics that he was interested in, which were things like cinema, literature, humanities. And he wanted to go from simply learning information to then creating something, because that's something that I think is underrated, which is a lot of people think about summer schools and online courses and things like that. Universities don't just want to see that you can take in information. They want to know that you can create information, do things that go beyond what other students can do. And this is because once you're in university, you're not just sitting in classes and writing exams, you're also writing papers. You are participating in clubs and organizing events. You are part of student government, where you're thinking about policies for your undergraduate community and how to change that up. So they want to see not just thinkers, but also doers. And so he actually worked with us to write a research program that focused on the representation of post-colonial identities in Indian and African films, working with a mentor who's doing a PhD in sociology at the University of Cambridge. And he made the argument that the different experiences that these countries have gone through historically under colonialism and after independence changed how those experiences were then represented in film and media. Super, super interesting paper, and a demonstration that he's able to think at a really high level beyond what other high school students are able to. And you can see that in the results, going to places like NYU and King's and Warwick. And there you can also see that doing these kinds of activities helps definitely for the US, but being able to show research and intellectual ability is also valued for the UK as well, but also ended up getting into Stanford, which is where he eventually went on to go. Go to the next slide. Shrestha is from closer to home, from Bangalore, and she was a giant Grey's Anatomy fan. So for those of you who don't know, Grey's Anatomy is a long-running TV show, which is based in a hospital. And this is actually an important detail to mention, because a lot of students and a lot of parents are like, my kid isn't interested in anything. He just has no interest. And I'm like, unless you are literally have been living under a rock, there is no way that a kid doesn't have interests. And there are ways of identifying what those interests are. So when you're sitting in school for 7 hours a day, there's some topics that you hear and you go, okay, I'm curious about that and want to learn more. And there are other topics that you hear about and you go, I never want to think about that again. So what are those topics that make you sit up in class a little bit and pay a little bit more attention? When you're scrolling on Instagram, what are the reels that make you stop and look? When you're looking at the news, what is it that makes you zone out? And what is it that makes you actually pay attention? Those are the things that I think are important to help a student identify and not go, okay, if you're watching TV, if you are on social media, that's just a distraction and unrelated to what your interests are. That is often a tool to discover what those interests are. And so she has an interest. She's a big Grey's Anatomy fan. She really liked the idea of doing medicine. And what she ended up doing was she had done a few different things. She'd done a project in aerospace. She'd done an intern for an aerospace company. She'd also participated in a competition hosted by the Singapore Science and Technologies Company, which is called the International Space Challenge. So she had a few different things. And she ended up working in doing an AI project with us under the Veritas AI program, where she did a project called Alternative Propulsion Options, how ionic wind propulsions and hybrid electric propulsion systems can revolutionize aviation. So using machine learning AI models to think about propulsion systems, once again, with a mentor from Cambridge. And what's interesting here is because she was applying to the US, it didn't matter that the things that she was working on weren't related to medicine. Once she goes to the University of Michigan, which is where she ended up getting into, she can either continue on this field of kind of machine learning and AI and engineering, or she can start taking biology classes and build a pre-med career with the goal of eventually applying to medical school. Or she might get to college and discover that what she's really in love with is history, and that's what she wants to go down as well. And I think this is an example of a student who had multiple different interests, but built a spike in an area that might not be what she eventually wants to do in life, but that will serve her well in becoming a more well-rounded thinker and expert. Go to the next slide. And finally, Avni, she's from Indore. She went to Emerald Heights School. She was a debater as well, represented India at the World Schools Debating Championships, and also had a deep interest in the criminal justice system in India. Like, how do police make decisions about who to arrest? How does the jail system work? How do the courts work? And so on. And so she won a full ride scholarship to do our research program. And she worked with a mentor at the University of Oxford to analyze how legal provisions in India affect the behavior of the police. And so it was a way of taking the things that she was interested in. She'd done some volunteering and on the groundwork, and turning that into an intellectual output that she could then show universities to say, okay, I've got what it takes to succeed at the highest levels. And so she ended up getting into Yale, where she's currently a freshman and also part of the debate team. And I think this is an interesting example of someone, there was a question in the chat about interest in the social sciences, and an example of how someone can take an interest in things like law and political science, go from things that they're seeing in the news and in the world around them to on the ground work, and then eventually a research project. So these are just three examples to demonstrate the wide variety of things that students can do. They're interested in different things. One was film and the humanities, one was law and political science, one was engineering and medicine. They used different tools to explore their interests. One used a summer school, one participated in a competition, one did on-the-ground volunteering. And then the end goal of all of those was to build those out into a project, a research paper, something that can demonstrate that they have the ability to create output, to do something that changes the minds and actions of people around them, which help them all stand out when they eventually apply to university. And even if none of these students had ended up going to university in the US or the UK, as Pavitra said, I think the important thing to remember is having done these types of things in high school changes who you are as a person. It makes you a much deeper thinker, a better communicator. It makes you think much more widely about the world, and also sets you up well for success in kind of these new age universities like Ashoka and Kriya and so on, if that's where you want to apply. Plus, if you do end up staying in India for undergrad or going to Singapore or somewhere like that, gives you the knowledge and experience that allows you to navigate those systems a lot better. When I go to university, I majored in economics almost by default because I didn't know what sociology was or anthropology was. I didn't feel like I could engage with those topics. And so getting that exposure in high school, I think, also makes you better able to make use of the opportunities once you eventually get to college. So with that, we'll pause the slides. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was useful in getting a sense of what studying abroad can look like in different places and the value of it, as well as what kinds of actions you might want to take in middle school and high school to explore your interests, build up who you are as a person, and gain expertise with a goal of hopefully getting into a top university, but more importantly, becoming a more thoughtful and engaged human in the world.
And that brings us to the end of our narrative, and we would love to take on some of the questions. Already you have been asking us some fantastic questions in the chat, and we've been trying to respond to them as and when we can. So if there are any more questions, we can take a few. And I'd love some feedback from the audience, parents, especially what was your take on how the session went? That would be great. Okay, how do you find a mentor as a high school student? Dhruva, that question looks like it has your name on it.
Yeah, great question. Are you thinking specifically about a research mentor, or are you thinking about a mentor who can help you think about your career and applications more generally?
That's a great point. So if it's the latter, then Galvanize would be able to help. If it's the former, then it's Lumiere. And that's why we make great partners.
Exactly right. And you can also try, if you feel like, okay, I don't want to do it in a structured way, it's possible to try and find that independently. So you could go on LinkedIn and find people that have the kind of profile that you're interested in and try cold messaging them. You could ask your parents and other adults in your life if they know someone who's in this area. You could reach out to your school teachers and the alumni of your school and see if there's someone in the field. I think the difference is that definitely takes a lot of effort. You have to often email or reach out to several dozen people to get some responses. And then you're making an ask of their time where they might be okay to do one call, might be okay to help you out, but it's difficult to do that consistently over time. And I think that's why you have structured programs like ours that have risen in popularity, because by compensating people for their time, by creating structure, you have the ability to make use of these resources more effectively.
That's great. So this is interesting. Someone asked about scholarships as well. Yes, there are scholarships for undergraduate education. And it's not easy, and you have to be exceptional to get it, because ultimately, what's a scholarship? It means a university says, I want you so much to be my student that I'm ready to pay you for it, right? That's what a scholarship means. So you have to be the kind of candidate that a university is, hell-bent on getting. So I do want to share a couple of pointers on this. There are a range of universities by ranking. Like, I know a student who got a full scholarship at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and zero scholarship at Berkeley in California, and ultimately chose to attend Swarthmore, a private liberal arts college, at 50% scholarship. Right, it's a very famous liberal arts college, and you get with a very excellent faculty student ratio, right? You get a different experience. So you might get scholarship at one university and not at another, and that's possible. And you have to take that decision, right? How you want to go about it. There are also organizations in India that offer scholarships. For example, I think Tata offers scholarships to university students who go to Cornell, right, because of the close connection that the alumni experience. And there are eight or a few Indian scholarships for Indian students who go to Cornell, right, full scholarships, right? As long as you maintain your GPA and you do all the things you're supposed to. Obviously, they're not paying you to go there and party all night. So there are options. Agriculture, if you want to study agriculture engineering, the government of India actually offers scholarships, especially if you come back, because they want to, they are there, but they're not popular. People don't know about it. So that's our job, right? As mentors, as counselors, when we have seen hundreds of students go through the entire journey, over time, we accumulate a lot of knowledge and experience and intuition that we can then disseminate to our students and help them along their journey. So that would be my answer to the scholarship question. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, Aryan asks, would you be able to help with the complete process of enrollments and prerequisites? So, well, I guess it depends on what you mean by the complete process, right? We can definitely guide you through. So somebody at Galvanize and Lumia, like our expertise is in guiding students. It's in understanding where you stand today, where you need to get to, and helping you outline a path for it. Right. And we can also give you the tools that you need and the mentorship and the support and the resources that you need at every stage. Now, the person who's actually going to walk that path is you, right? So we cannot write your essays for you, and we should not write it for you. But if we can help you, if you were to share all your formative experiences, we can help you structure a narrative around that and say, hey, why don't you talk about this first? And then it leads into that. Right? We can help you polish your essay. We can help you put your best foot forward, highlight, what makes you a really good candidate. But the experiences have to be true and honest and genuine, and they have to come from you, because if you don't want to copy something, because, well, first of all, universities have been running plagiarism detection algorithms even before AI, and now it's gotten even hotter, right? So if your essay kicks off a threshold, like if it's more than 40% likely that it is not original, then the rest of your application will be disqualified. So please be original in whatever you write. And yes, then we can help you through the complete process. The other input that I do want to share is parents, they put their children in so many activities, right? Kids is going to this tuition and that class and this coaching and this camp. Now, the kid also has to have energy and time to reflect on these experiences and then summarize them into and articulate them, right? Now, if they're continuously in a frenzy, then how are they going to be able to share? Oh, hey, I as a result of this particular exposure, this camp, I learned this, and this made me question that fundamentally, right? For example, one essay question in the Common App. Okay, one of the essay questions is there a belief in your community or society that made you uncomfortable and you wanted to question it and you tried to change it? How did you go about changing that belief? What were the results? Were you able to succeed? How did you change as a result of that? Now, as a parent, if you do not give your child the space to have these experiences, then how are they going to talk about these experiences? So, yes, we can help you with the complete process, but from your side, you will have to be willing to complete the process, right? To have a completion in various dimensions of the experience, which is a little unsettling for Indian parents, because the whole IIT, JEE and the board exam, the whole, train that we all got onto and hopped onto, and it's a very different pathway, right? Where if you focus on one thing very, very deeply, you succeed here. But there they want to see who you are flowering as an entire person. So yes, if you're ready for the experience, then we are ready to travel the entire journey with you. Okay. So thank you so much, for staying with us and for your feedback. We really, we love the, opportunity to talk to you. Dhruva and I have been doing this for some time. We are, we both have studied abroad at great schools, and interestingly, we're now enabling that journey for thousands of students and their parents as well. So I always tell parents, right, especially those who have not traveled abroad, once your kid completes 1 year, you make sure once they get admission, you apply for your visa. It's going to take you 1 year right now to get your visa in hand. By then, their summer vacation will be there. They'll be doing an internship. So you make your flight plans, you go there, and then you go and visit the Niagara Falls or, the plains of Scotland with them. And that will be an opportunity to cherish. right? So this is a journey not just for students, it's a journey for parents as well. It's an experience of a lifetime. And we wish all our students and parents the very best of luck. So on behalf of Howard Club of Chennai and Ivy Club of Chennai, want to thank everybody. And once again, thanks to the organizers for making this happen. This has been a lovely conversation. And thank you so much, Dhruva and Sanjay, for hosting us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.